Hi, John. Thanks for joining me on Behind the Build. I'm Paul Drake, and this podcast is about getting real insights rather from housing experts, leaders in manufacturing and construction. There's no scripts, there's no sugarcoating, and it's great exposure for you and your organisation. Here's how I would like to run our session today. I want to understand you, your background, trends you're seeing in the industry, whether that's technology, market shifts, or operational changes, the challenges you're facing right now, and where you'd like to take the organisation over the next 6 to 12 months. We'll wrap up at the end with any insights that we might find valuable. Does that sound good?
Yep, that sounds fantastic, Paul.
Excellent. It'll probably take about 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the length of your answers. And we're going to start with a bit about you. So if you wouldn't mind telling me a bit about yourself, John, what's your role and how did you end up in the position you're in today?
Great. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, great to be with you. My name's Jon Kuhrt, and I'm Chief Exec of the charity Hope into Action. And we're a relatively new charity. We just started 15 years ago, and we provide housing for people who've been homeless, and we do it in partnership with local churches. So this is a field I've been involved in over the last, I think, 32 years. Way back in 1993, I started working in a hostel in South London. So ever since then, I've had a variety of roles on the sort of front line of homelessness services, really. I've done a couple of chief exec jobs, and I had one spell, the only spell where I wasn't working for a charity was as a 4-year secondment to the government as an advisor on rough sleeping.
All right.
So that's been a taste of my jobs.
Good. Give us a high-level overview of the organisation then. You briefly touched on it.
So Hope into Action, we're based in Peterborough, and we started in 2010 when a guy called Ed Walker, he was really struck by the homelessness that he was seeing. He'd worked in Africa for 10 years and came back to Peterborough, his hometown, and basically was really shocked about the homelessness. And when he received an inheritance, a relative died, and he chose to use this to buy a house for people who were homeless in Peterborough. And that was the start of our organisation. So started off with that one guy using his own money, him and his wife. And they're not, really wealthy at all. They just thought this was the right thing to do. And what we've grown ever since. We starting in Peterborough, then going to Cambridge, then Norwich, then Nottingham. And we've now got a network of 131 houses that have all been purchased with private investment, essentially, people choosing to use their capital to put into buying a house. We do the professional side of the support for the homeless people, and then every house is in partnership with the local church, who basically provide friendship and community, all the sort of softer, the sort of nice stuff that really combats loneliness, and it makes sure people have a connection in the local community. So you could sum it up where you've got the financial capital of investors with the social capital of churches coming together.
That sounds like a good mix. So what does a typical day look like in John's life, if there is one?
Yeah, well, it's times are tough at the moment. I mean, in homelessness provision, I've been in this game for a good period of time, and I'd say things are worse than ever, if I'm honest, Paul. I was doing a talk the other day saying that I don't think there's much cause for optimism, but we've got to be people of hope, and it's that sort of that blend between the two, because basically my day is really dominated by the need to respond to the pressures that we see. So at the moment, we're housing almost 500 people a year, but our model really depends on people having referrals, especially from local authorities, and then being able to look after people for a couple of years and then move them on. Now, it's that move on that really causes challenges at the moment. There's such a pressure on the whole system. And we've got a situation where we've got 131,000 households in temporary accommodation across the country. That's by far the most it's ever been since records began. And a lot of it is because of the housing costs. In London councils alone, it's £5 million a day paying for temporary accommodation. And of course, that's actually outside of all this controversy about asylum seekers being in hotels at the moment. So there's just a huge amount of money going on that end of things. And of course, it's tragic that that's not going into actually building longer term affordable accommodation. I mean, all this money is going into the hands of people who run hotels and various nightly paid accommodation, but it's essentially money down the drain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sad, really. I was talking to somebody else the other day, whose name escapes me. I'll send you his details, because he was in a similar space, looking after people that need homes desperately at various different stages. And they were using modular housing, so things that came on the back of a lorry, essentially, to reduce the costs, to reduce the build time, to put things on site quickly, to provide good accommodation for people that really need it in a way that they could be phased through. Use that pathway from whatever that first initial touch point is out into some other way of living, I guess. But that seemed to be a good way of, well, for me anyway, it seemed to be a good way of achieving more with less. And I guess there's always that challenge of land and all the rest of that. But there's got to be land that could be repurposed for this sort of thing. And if you can get more of these modular houses in a space that isn't currently optimized, then it seems like a good thing to me.
I think it really can be part of the answer. I think one of the challenges with the modular scene really is that there's a lot of people buzzing around it. There's been a lot of I guess excitement. The amount of people who've come to see me with sort of big visions about modular really solving the issues has been a lot, basically. And we've had our fingers burnt slightly, actually, with one modular scheme that we entered into, where just the end result wasn't in keeping with what we were promised, and it was quite painful. I hope someone can really come up with some scalable solution that can really work. I think one of the things that I would always say, being not a building person, is that as well as the actual, well, I was going to say bricks and mortar, but of course with a modular there's no bricks or mortar. No. But it's the physical resources that you provide are one element of addressing homelessness, and they're a very important element. We desperately need more affordable accommodation, and I think modular's definitely got a role to play. But also people need communities and they need connection. And so that's why we want, as Hope Interaction, we want to be focused both on, as I say, that accommodation plus the relationships that go around it, and the access to work and meaning, as well as giving people a roof over their heads. It's a reason to live. It's a reason to engage, a reason to connect with people. That all that stuff's vital too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I've just had a look there. The guy was called Rob Sagg from Chess Homeless.
Right. Yes. In Essex, is that Chess?
Yeah.
Chelmsford.
Yeah. It seemed like they're doing good things in that space, and also creating that community as well within that. So it may be worth having a conversation with them to see how they do it.
Chess are one of many, really good local organisation. I've visited them in the past. Yeah, I connected them when I was doing that government job.
Right. Okay. So you're very well connected in that space then. Moving on to trends then. So you're seeing any sort of technology shifts or operational efficiencies dominating what you do currently, or helping you do that more efficiently or better?
We are a couple of things that we're particularly working on. We've developed a bespoke Salesforce-based platform recently, and rather than get one off the shelf, we actually entered into a pretty intense development relationship with a small IT provider who really understood what we were all about. And I'm really pleased with the outcome. We call it, all of our frontline staff are called empowerment workers, because basically what we want to do, rather than induce sort of dependency or the wrong kind of relationship with the people we're serving, we really want to empower them to be, standing on their own 2 feet. And it's one of the misunderstandings some people have about homelessness, that I think a lot of people from the outside might think it's all about just giving things to people. And that's quite superficial, really, because actually what prevents homelessness in the long term is people really being able to pay their rent, being able to look after their accommodation, take responsibility for themselves. It's quite tough love, a lot of it, really. So our frontline staff are called empowerment workers, and we've developed this online system called Empower, which is really working well, actually, to cut down bureaucracy, cut down paperwork. People who've had trauma in their past, having to repeat that trauma less in terms of explaining what's happened to them, and being able to take really good field notes online on a phone rather than lots of typing up and writing up. So it means our frontline staff can spend more time directly with the people they're serving and connected to. So that's been really good. IT projects are fraught with risks. I think, again, you can start off, can't you, with big dreams and they don't quite realize. But actually, we've been really blessed to work with a partner. They're called Suru Partners, based in Coventry. And they've been fantastic to work with. We've had to grapple and bash things through a lot, but it's been ultimately really, really good. And when I see frontline staff really loving an IT system, I know we've done something right. So that's pleasing.
Well, that's one of the main challenges, isn't it? Nobody likes change, but as long as you've done it in the right way, then it's easier to onboard them onto that journey.
Exactly. And being aware that one phrase they use that listeners might connect with is the idea of like demo dazzle. That these people come and promise the world and they say, oh, this is going to change your life. And, it just doesn't. And I think we've had to go the hard yards and really bashing this through and making sure that it does actually do the job we want it to.
Yeah, they're good at the job, aren't they, these salespeople?
Absolutely.
Selling you the dream. Are you seeing any uncertainties in the industry? I mean, there will be uncertainties. There's definitely, we've already mentioned some already. But
yeah, absolutely. I think that we're in a business or an industry, and sadly, the homeless sector in the 32 years I've been in it has got far, far bigger than it used to be. And that's a sector. I mean, even the phrase homelessness sector makes me a bit uncomfortable. That actually, when I started in the 90s, it was quite a niche job, really, because homelessness affected quite a small number of people and they needed help. Whereas now, it's become far broader and bigger. There's more and more homeless charities, and local authorities have got their hands full with it. So I think the trends that we're seeing is a build-up of pressure where inevitably homeless charities are working with people in crisis, but there's more and more people in chronic need. And the difference between crisis and chronic is very important to understand, because you shouldn't address a chronic problem with a crisis response. If people are in chronic housing need, they don't just need more food and more handouts. They actually need something that's going to address the chronic unaffordability of housing. So we see lots of pressures where we can be growing emergency services, responding to people when actually the underlying issues are not improving. And it's a little bit like an analogy that people might understand. It's a bit like an iceberg, that you've got rough sleeping, which is the tip of the iceberg. It's the bit that's really seen above the waterline. It's the bit of homelessness that's most visible to, I'm sure most people listening will have seen people sleeping rough or begging or whatever locally. But actually the bigger problem, by far the bigger problem, is underneath the waterline. It's these 131,000 households that are in temporary accommodation. And those pressures can never be dealt with just by charities like mine. I mean, it really needs a structural response. I think we need a revolution, really, in affordable housing. We'll always be tinkering on the edges of that as charities, really.
Yeah. So on the opposite side of that, then, do you see any opportunities? Any shoots of growth? Not growth, but any shoots of opportunity and optimism?
Yep, absolutely. I think the whole there's a phrase that's been increasingly used, that homelessness ends in community, and I think that's really, really true. And that, as well as accommodation, don't want to downplay accommodation; it's vital. But the idea of a community that people can be part of, understanding the sort of people side of homelessness. I often talk about homelessness being a result of three types of poverty. You've got resources poverty, not having affordable accommodation or being in debt, and all stuff to do with material need, resources. Then relationships and people being isolated and lonely. And I think that there is a lot more understanding of that, because the third angle, as well as resources, relationships, is identity, and people actually finding identity for themselves within their communities. So yeah, I think it's fantastic, the openness of churches to open up their places, to be welcoming, to provide a sort of pseudo family for people who don't. And every week I'm visiting churches that are doing amazing work in opening up their spaces and connecting with people who often have got a pretty mixed past, may not be that easy to connect with, but I think that's a whole area that is, yeah, really, really encouraging and inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, good. So you mentioned that you're very small in terms of the charitable size. Where do you fit within the whole homelessness sort of ecosystem, if that is, I mean, I would say ecosystem, because that's just like saying not the industry again, which isn't a good thing either. But where do you sit within there?
Yeah.
You say, John?
Well, what we've got is, I talked earlier about, we started in Peterborough, went to these other three cities, Peterborough, Cambridge and Norwich. Went to Peterborough, then went to Cambridge, Norwich and Nottingham. But then we developed a franchise model where lots of different churches or charities in other parts of the country can look at our model and actually develop a Hope into Action in their city or town. So actually we've got another 33 locations. So we've at the moment got 37 locations in the whole country. So although centrally we're quite lean, we employ 41 people at Hope into Action UK, and our turnover is about 2.2 million. So that makes us, I guess, in the sort of medium-sized homeless charity. But actually, the growth isn't really in that getting bigger. We don't really have ambitions for that central core to get that much bigger. What we want to do is grow our franchise operation. So that's why things like the Salesforce platform, the Empower system, is really important, because it builds in our learning into a structure that can then scale. So yes, we don't have ambitions to grow an empire so much, but we want to grow a movement. We want to see more people taking on this model. I do believe, we talked about resources poverty. There is so much resources available. There is a lot of money tied up that could be released. There's so many empty homes, for example. So it's a case of, I think, the structures, being geared to actually release these resources better. And I'm really hoping, we've, since Ed originally, when he started the charity, put in 30,000, we've subsequently had over 32 million invested. But we think this is, just the beginning. We think we can really see more investments, a lot of people are looking for an impact investment, who, they might be sitting on some money. They don't want to give it away. But they can invest it. We can give them a small return. It's only 2%. So of course they are sacrificing, but they can also see that money change people's lives.
Yeah, and they're doing it for a good cause as well, which is good. And it's nice to see that you're using digital tools to help you do more with less, which is always a good thing to be doing, I would say. So what does the organisation do extraordinarily well, would you say, John?
I think, coming back to that word empower, when I meet our tenants who've often been sleeping rough, or they've been in addictions, what I want to see and what I love to hear is when they're talking about their own steps of their journey, that their own pride in working and in doing really well. So we don't want to take pride in how many things we've given out. We want to talk about how their lives have been changed and they are now, working and contributing and moving on. We got a woman called Susie who the other day went and spoke at a big conference down at the Victoria and Albert Museum in Kensington. It was a big kind of conference with lots of the great and the good, but she was asked to speak because of a video that we did about her journey. She was a former heroin addict, been in prison, had a very, very difficult past, had also been very difficult, not an easy person, but actually in coming out of prison, coming into a Hope into Action house, she has now someone who's really contributing to our local community. And, hand in hand with the local church, she's gone on this incredible journey where she is not just talking about, she's not a passive recipient of charity. She's an active participant in her community, giving something back. She's gone on her own journey in terms of her faith and commitment, and it's got empowerment written all over it. So that's what I think we aim to do really, really well, and that's what we want to be talking about in terms of what we think people most need, not just handouts but hand ups.
I like it. Empowerment. It's a good word. So what would you say that do you call them clients? That people that you
tenants, we call them
tenants,
generally. Yeah.
So what would you say? What is there a common theme that your tenants say about the service that you're providing? Is the one thing that stands out that's common?
Yeah, I think this sense of hope, it's in our name, hope into action. Hope's written in people who want to use their capital to get the houses. It's in the churches who want to partner with us. And that's what we want to instill in our tenants, that the future can be better than the past. The mistakes that have affected people, or the bad luck, or the pain, can actually be moved on from. And yeah, we take a lot of outcome measurements. I mean, last year, for example, 100% of the people who came to us who had served custodial sentences, 100% didn't return to prison. So for me, that's awesome. It's the first time in our history that's ever been 100%. But also things like 97% said that their social relationships had improved in the time they'd been living with us. 91% said their mental health had improved. So these are the stats around people actually. They've got the housing, yes, the bricks and mortar, but they are then from there finding hope in their life, connections with people. And like all of us, homeless people are like all of us. They want to feel connected. They want to feel their life is meaningful. They want to feel like they've got a contribution to make. It's all the same as us. We want to avoid projects or approaches that kind of put them as the other. That they are people like us, often been through terrible things. But I love our name because I do believe in hope, but it does need to be put into action.
Yeah. Nice. So where do you want to see the organisation going over the next 6 to 12 months, Jon?
Sure.
Have you got a vision? Have you got a plan?
Yes, I think we want to weather this storm. To be honest, we're thinking a lot about sustainability at the moment. We've had to go on a bit of a journey where some of our smaller franchises have been buffeted by the situation, especially with local authorities. I mean, the bar for running supported housing has gone up and up in terms of requirements and registration. There's the SHIP program, supported housing improvement plans at the moment. Now, we are in favour of those because there's too many dodgy providers out there who are getting a lot of housing benefit for not providing hardly any support. And so we're in favour of the regulation, but it does create demands. So I think we've got to weather things. We want to see more investment. We want to, we've launched a new partnership with another charity called Stewardship, who help people give money, and that's really exciting for us because, offering good, credible investment opportunities to people is a really key area of what we do. But I would say, a bit of consolidation, continuing to build these sort of foundations for where then we can grow from 131 houses, and be looking at the steps to go up to 200 and grow from there.
Nice. And operationally wise, what do you see the biggest challenge in doing that, building your housing stock? Are there any obvious operational challenges within there?
I think the biggest operational one is making sure our model works so that people stay for 2 years, because supported housing should be time limited. We want to help people during times of difficulty, but to be empowered to get back on their feet, and actually securing move on is really tough. The old routes through local authorities just have really dried up. So we're having to be more creative and innovative, make partnerships with private sector landlords who believe in what we're doing. So I think that's probably the biggest pressure that comes. And we are a charity. We have to raise £1 million a year. So of the 2.2 million, $1 million is charitable income. Now that's very high ratio. For a lot of charities, it's far less than that. So that puts a lot of pressure on me.
Yeah.
After this podcast, I'll be getting back to talking to some of our supporters and donors and things, because we need that support. But we're blessed with people who really believe in what we're doing. So we're recipient of a lot of generosity as well.
Yeah. How do you manage the upkeep of these properties? Just as a curious side question.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the people who invest have and especially a lot of them they retain ownership of the property, so they're responsible for the major items, the windows, boilers, etc. But then the local churches are really involved in keeping the day-to-day upkeep. So turning it from a house into a home, being in and out of the home. Again, obviously we have to be careful. Sometimes houses do get a bit trashed, but it's occasional. And yeah, we our empowerment workers are in and out as well, and we just try and make sure that, using that word ecosystem, the ecosystem of the house is healthy and right, and things are getting addressed and dealt with. But it's brilliant to have a little team of people with a local church who, when a tenant leaves, they can come in and refresh that room, be involved in the interviewing of a new tenant, and then really welcoming them. And we do find that if we give people good quality accommodation that's well looked after, and we're dealing with the issues, then they look after it.
Mm. Yeah, I think that is a known thing, isn't it? If they're taking it into some other space of where people apply graffiti to walls, if it's looked after and well maintained and it looks nice, there's less chance of that happening. I think that some theory or other I can't remember the name of now, but it's a well proven thing that you do create nice spaces for people and people will look after them.
Absolutely. And you have to, of course our work has to be tough as well. We can't I don't want to sound all utopian about it, but yeah, absolutely right. I mean, when I first came across Hope Into Action, before I worked for them, I heard one of their tenants talk about the tenant had just mentioned that lemon sherbets were her favourite sweet, just as a past throwaway comment. And when she moved into her room, the church had bought her one of those glass jars full of lemon sherbets.
Nice.
And it was just a little example of that personal touch that makes someone think, someone's thinking about me, I'm valued. And, they repeated it. It was only, I don't know, what cost a £5 or whatever, but such value that's beyond the financial, shown there. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. What would you say has been the biggest struggle so far? Raising money?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think our financial challenges are shared by a lot of charities. Definitely. I think we're insulated to a degree because I think that we've got so many community partners, so many people are sort of invested literally in what we're doing. So we're blessed by that. I think one of the really interesting things that people might connect with is that I took over from the founder of the charity. And that's a really critical moment for any organization. Ed, very innovative and visionary, got an MBE for setting up Hope Into Action. And it's been a really critical 2.5 years for me in dovetailing with him as the outgoing chief exec. He's been brilliant. He's got no governance responsibilities or any management involvement anymore. He's gone on to another job. But we had to really get that right, that handover. And I think it's a really critical moment when someone with the vision and the passion has done their time. He did 13 years. But it's a really good model. And if anyone's listening who is in that position, I think it's a fascinating area to talk about, the sort of ego management of it, really, because again, these are the people side of things. And it's been good, but it's been a very demanding 2.5 years for me, but one I've really enjoyed. Yes, so a few, wake ups at 3 a.m. worrying about a few things.
Breaking out in a cold sweat.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Looks like you've done a good job anyway, Jon. So from a personal perspective, then, what does achieving your objectives over the next sort of 6 to 12 months mean?
Yeah. I think for me, I've focused internally quite a lot in the first 2.5 years. I think inevitably, sort of, again, sorting out systems, things that are under the bonnet. I think it is time. I've got to get my head up and look, further beyond more external relationships and spending time externally with people. But I do feel, I mean, for me, as I'm a Christian and my faith really sort of informs what I'm trying to do. So a lot of my ambitions connect to thinking, can we really have an organization that continues to be shaped by the faith and the values that have started it? And if I can hand it over to someone else in the way it was handed to me, that's one of my real ambitions, that it will be sustainable, good governance. I've got trustees who are really good, they're really supportive, but they also tell me what they think. And I think that's what we want to do, grow steadily, grow well, take hold of the opportunities, continue to share hope, but also make sure it's a really well run, good operation that's transforming people's lives.
Yeah, excellent. And empowering them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that brings us to the end of our podcast, Jon. So it's been brilliant, fantastic, and thanks for being so open and candid with your challenges and the opportunities that you see, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Paul. Thanks for inviting me. And if anyone needs to be in touch, I'm sure you can share details.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jon.